Appreciate that on a Saturday morning. A lot of places you could be besides a seminar. Out on the beach, up in the mountains, visiting friends, having a picnic. So, it cost me to be here, right, away from my family, but same for you, right? But, committed to learning, we just have to take the time. But 2 days is exciting because it builds momentum. Do we have any teenagers or less? Beautiful. Let's give them a hand. I tell the story about the two little boys in school. One was very bright. The other one was not very bright. Teacher gave a test one day, 10 questions, and she's looking at the two papers. To her surprise, the little boy who wasn't very bright answered 9 of the 10 questions perfect. Teacher said, "Can't be. He's not that smart." She looked at the other paper, a little boy who was very bright. He answered 9 of the 10 questions perfect. Teacher said, "Something's wrong." Sure enough, the problem was the answers to the 10th question. A little boy, very bright, got to the 10th question, didn't know the answer, running out of time. He just wrote down, "I don't know the answer to this one." Turned his paper in. Teacher looked at the other paper. A little boy who wasn't very bright, he answered the 10th question, "I don't know either." So, which I guess means don't cheat, right? It never seems to work out well. Anyway, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. It was a fun day yesterday. I got excited. I got off on these tangents and going every which way, and, I'm way behind on all the notes that I want to cover these 2 days, but we'll do some catching up today. If you're ready, say I'm ready.
I'm ready.
We introduced communications. We talked about personal development yesterday. We talked about enlightened self-interest, and some very interesting subjects that intrigued me, at least, when I started making all these studies. And now we're going to talk about probably the major skill in your life to learn because it affects everything else you do, called communication. So let's get started. 4 steps to achieving good communications. This is some very simple stuff. Anybody can master it. Here's step number 1. Have something good to say. This simply means, preparation is the key to good communication. If you're in business that requires communication, it's all the more important. But it's called a lifetime of preparation, getting ready. Nothing comes out until something goes in. We call it in computer language. You got to put stuff in, and now you can get it out. So the key is consistently to make deliberate, consistent effort to keep putting into your head, putting into your heart and soul information from your experiences. We talk about capturing it, absorbing it yesterday, so that now you've got something, right? You cannot speak that which you do not know. You can't relate what you don't have. You can't give out what hasn't come in. So the first key to good communication is a consistent way to gather information, knowledge, experience, and then remember it and store it and have it available so that you can use it. Preparation is the key. Now, to achieve preparation, I got 4 good words. Here they are. First, interest. See if you can't just sharpen your curiosity and your interest in life and people. Those are the big subjects, life and people. What about life? The questions you might have about life and the mysteries of life. What about people and human behavior? People ask me, Mr. Rohn, when you go to Russia, are the people there the same as they are in America? And the answer is yes. Everywhere I go around the world, from South Africa to Northern Ireland, to you name it, the people are the same. What they want is the same. They would like to be employed. They'd like to have something interesting to do. They'd like to have a way to earn their way. They'd like to make a good living. They'd like to supply, incredible values for their family, plan for the future, not only for the next generation, but the next generation. They'd like to make a contribution to the community and to the country. They'd like to be valuable in more than one respect. They'd like to be good parents. They'd like to leave a legacy behind. And that list is the same. It doesn't matter whether you go to Siberia or whether you go to Australia. It doesn't make any difference. It's We all have those kind of ambitions. And in some countries, of course, the opportunity to do so is a lot better than other countries that are struggling, some with just survival, let alone succeeding. But that's all the same. But if you were to sharpen up your interest, and if you were to just keep a journal of your impressions when you visit another city, when you visit another region, right? If you've never been to Brooklyn and you go, you got to do a little observing. Here's, when they use this language, here's what that means. I go to Australia and they say, if it's raining, bring your brelly. I say, your brelly? Yes, that means umbrella. And if you've got some pickies, we'll look at them. And pickies means pictures. And they got all these kind of unique words so that when you visit Australia, when you go to other countries, you just pick up on this. It's because it's interesting. It's interesting conversation. And if you know a little bit about this, right, it's fascinating, right? This morning I had a little brekkie. A little brekkie means breakfast. Brelly means umbrella. Pickies means pictures. It's just kind of their interesting language in Australia. But that's interesting. The key is to just sharpen up your interest in life and people and region and country and nation and ceremonies and style and expressions, all that. Right? Remember when I first visited the South, right? You learn to say you all, right? How are you all? Even if they're talking to one person, they say you all. And, we'll carry you to the meeting. They don't drive you to the meeting, they carry you to the meeting. Just simple little unique expressions. And then the diversity of food. I love squirrel gumbo, black-eyed peas and fried okra. Delicious. Raised in Idaho, I had no idea what it meant till I went to Louisiana. And I love to go fishing for the largemouth bass. My buddy Elmer Gibson's got this bass boat, right? 70 miles an hour. These bass fishermen are serious folks, right? It's unbelievable. And you just pick up all of that flavor and the style and the language and the idiosyncrasies of wherever you go, whether it's to Chicago or whether it's to South America. It doesn't matter. If you pick all that up, that's called sort of consistently preparing so that when your conversation will be more interesting than someone else. And you can flavor it with the color of your experiences of where you've been and what you've seen and what you've heard and all of that. So that's number one on being better prepared. Develop an interest, a sharper interest in life and in people. Then here's number two, fascination. To go from interest to fascination. Interested people want to know, does it work? Fascinated people want to know, how does it work? Right? What goes on below the surface? I can see that it works, but what makes it work? Fascination. Kids have this extraordinary ability to ask these questions, right? They can ask, 100 an hour. It's amazing. It's because they want to know. They want to know. Their mind is just zinging all the time. Questions about what's happening and what's going on and how does it work and why is it this way and how come it works like this. See, that's so valuable in preparing to store in your mental bank and your bank of experiences more and more information, more and more experiences, colored and flavored by your own emotional content, so that when you get ready to speak, you have something valuable to say. Preparation. And we must prepare all of our lives. It takes a long time to prepare a child to go on its own. After the first year, it isn't finished. The little wildebeest hasn't got long. When the little wildebeest is born in Africa, within less than an hour, it can run with the herd. The little wildebeest is born, and its mother gets it up and it falls back down, and she makes it get up and it falls back down. But after a while, on wobbly legs, it, gets a little stronger. And it's if the mother is saying, hurry, hurry, hurry. And why all the hurry? Because the lions, right? The lions aren't very far away. So you got to get this done fast. And within less than an hour, the little wildebeest can run with the herd and keep up and escape the lions. Now, human babies take a lot longer. After 16 years, we're not sure, right, that they can escape the lions, right, and run with the pack. So it takes a while to prepare. But here's what's happened. If you consistently prepare, Not just wait, and then try to quickly repair, like we used to do cramming for the exam, right? And we put it off, and we played baseball, and we did all this stuff. And now comes the night before, or a couple of nights before, and we're frantically trying to get ready to see if we can pass the test. Here's the key: consistent, day by day. Let life fascinate you. Let life interest you. Then I learned to substitute fascination instead of frustration. I used to be frustrated. Now I'm fascinated. It's a little trick you just have to play. But I've gotten pretty good at it. I'm on the freeway in Los Angeles. My airplane leaves in 35 minutes. The traffic's moving not 1 inch. I'm now fascinated. I'm telling you. Now, it doesn't work every time. Right? Nothing works every time. But here's the key. Every time you can get it to work, let something fascinate you instead of frustrate you. In recruiting and training we teach, you've got someone, you say, oh, this is going to be a good person for my organization, and they leave the next day. Here's what you must learn to say: isn't that interesting? And then here's a person you say, they probably won't stay long. They stay forever, and you say, isn't that interesting? I didn't think they were going to stay but just a little while. So if you just find it interesting, find it fascinating, be curious how life works. That's how you gather more from your life experiences and prepare for good communication. Here's the next word, and this is an important word: preparing for good communication. Sensitivity. Trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Trying to feel what they feel. Trying to hurt like they hurt. Sympathy, compassion. Sensitivity. Trying to understand where someone might be at the moment. The reason that they're angry, it may not be obvious, right? Maybe the IRS has just knocked on their door a couple of days ago. And that's why they're upset. You can't just go by what's obvious, because there might be some reasons behind the reasons behind the reasons. So you've got to learn to be a little more sympathetic, a little more understanding. Sensitivity training. This is vitally important, so that you can sympathize with someone, so that you can try your best to understand. Now, sometimes it's difficult, unless you are like that person, to sympathize or to have sensitivity. But here's what you must do. You must try. You must try. And people know when you try. I go to Mexico and try to speak a little Spanish. I'm listening to the Spanish station in Los Angeles. Great music on this great Spanish station in Los Angeles. Right? 107.5. La música romántica. Solo tú, mi amor, solo tú. If you just try, right? If you just try to understand, try to speak a few words. If you just try, I'm telling you, it goes such a long ways in identifying with people, in building a bridge of understanding, getting something started, good communication. So we've got interest, we've got fascination, we've got sensitivity. Here's one more word: knowledge. You just have to know. Working knowledge from keeping a journal. Being serious about your ongoing education. Filling up your mental and spiritual and emotional bank so that it becomes like an unending reservoir to draw from. Okay? That begins to help you prepare. Having something good to say. Doing your research, gathering up little poems, little stories. You just keep this flow of things going into your journal, going into your loose leaf book, as well as into your head, as well as into your heart. Preparation. I prepared this little talk. When I first started talking to service clubs all those years ago, 35 years ago, here's what it was called: the 4 ifs that make life worthwhile. The 4 ifs that make life worthwhile. Here was the first one: life is worthwhile if you learn. Learn as much as you can, as soon as you can. Knowledge is power. Knowledge sustains us. Knowledge is the beginning of wealth. It's the beginning of health. It's the beginning of enterprise. Knowledge. You've got to know what's happening. You've got to know what's going on. You've got to be up on current events. Life is worthwhile if you know. Don't leave yourself out of the knowledge loop. And it's so easy now to get the information by computer and from the internet and from television and from sermons and songs and lyrics and personal conversation, right? Information is all around us. You just need a good working system on how to gather that information. Life is worthwhile if you learn. Number 2, life is worthwhile if you try. Now that you know something, you got to try something. Information by itself doesn't totally enrich our life. Now you must give something a try. Try your hand at sales. Try your hand at a new career. Try your hand at something you haven't done before. Give it a try. Starting a business. Give it a try. See what happens. Try communicating in a way you haven't done before. Life is worthwhile if you try. When the finish of your life comes and the scorecard is written, let the scorecard show your wins and let the scorecard show your losses, but don't let the scorecard show you didn't try. That would be unforgivable. Somebody says, what about this? I say, just try it. Just try it. Why don't you just try it? See if it tastes good. See if it fits. If it doesn't fit, you can try something else, but why not give it a try? I didn't know I would be good at training. I just tried it. I didn't know I could stand up and talk to a group of people, but I tried it. My first one wasn't that good. I stood up, my mind sat back down. I opened my mouth right, and nothing came out for a little while. It was horrifying. But guess what? I did it again, and again, and again, and again, and finally I got a little more comfortable. And I used to stay right behind the podium, right? And somebody talked about, just venture out a little bit and be a little more animated. And I remember the first time I tried that, and I got out here, and I thought, how do you get back? Whoa, seems like a long ways back to the podium. But what do? You just try it. And everything you try that's brand new is going to be a little uncomfortable at first. But hey, after a while, it gets a little easier. It gets a little easier. So, life's worthwhile if you learn. Life is worthwhile if you try. Second, life is worthwhile if you stay. If you plant in the spring, you got to stay for a while. Some people plant in the spring and leave in the summer. It isn't happening fast enough for them. But hey, if you sign up for the turn of seasons, you got to stay for all the seasons. Right? If you plant in the spring, you got to at least see this planting through to the harvest and see what you're going to get from it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do the same kind of planting every spring, but at least once you go for the spring, now see it through. It's a good line. See it through. When you commit to something, see it through. A friend of mine, Jim Cardwell in Phoenix, I asked him what he was really good at. He said, starting over. I said, that's one of my specialties. I asked him if he was good at any particular sport, and he says, yes, skating on thin ice. I said, that's my sport. But he's a character. But some people, right, build a foundation. Then they go off somewhere else and build another foundation. Go to another place, build another foundation. They got these foundations scattered all across the country, right? No walls, no roof, nothing ever finished. Just always building a foundation, leaving. But, hey, if you've signed up for the seasons, beginning in the spring, you just got to stay through the spring, through the summer, into the harvest, and see what happens. See what the deal is. If this one didn't work out well, you make some adjustments and you go for it for another spring. But whatever you start, see it through. If you're going to play the game, they expect you to stay until what? It's over. You say, well, the score's not in my favor, I'm out of here. Say, no, you can't do that. Right? What if the local baseball team here, right, and they're a little bit behind, and it looks like they're not going to win, and say, hey, this is over for us, we're gone. I mean, they'd run you out of town, right? Even though you're way behind, you got to stay till it's over. And if you've committed to watch the game, come on, you got to stay till it's over. Someone says, no, I'm going to beat the traffic. Well, what kind of a big deal is that? Right? If you left and then the team says, well, it looks like everybody else is leaving, we're leaving. No, that wouldn't work. Here's the key. If the team stays, what? You stay. If the team stays, you stay. Who are these people before the game is over? Are walking behind you, spilling Coke down your back and elbow in your ear, trying to get out, and the game isn't over. Come on. So, If you've committed to watch, stay. If you've committed to play, stay. If you've committed to plant, you stay. At least through this season, through this time. See this one through. That's good advice. Now, there's always the exceptions to the rule. When you start something and, hey, it's obvious, this is not going to work. So you pull up stakes and then make the changes. But this is good advice. Life is worthwhile if you learn. It's worthwhile if you try. It's worthwhile if you stay. And here's the last one. Life is worthwhile if you care. If you care. And I wrote this little phrase. If you care at all, you'll get some results. If you care enough, you'll get incredible results. That was one of the talks I used to give way back in those early days. Service clubs. And there's a lot more to it than that. That's just a skeleton outline. But having got something good to say, preparation, that's the key. Now, here's the next step to good communication. And that's to say it well. Now that you've got something good to say, now you want to present it well so that it's acceptable, so that it's listenable. And saying it well is a whole list of things. Let's go through those. Here's number one, sincerity. I started the whole seminar program yesterday with, number one, I hope you find me sincere. Sincerity is not a test of truth. Only truth is the test of truth. But it is important to be sincere. Hopefully there's no question about my sincerity. And if somebody sincerely wants to listen, somebody sincerely wants to speak, you can get a lot accomplished. We start with sincerity. Next, to say it well, is repetition. Doing it over and over until you get better and better. Getting better this week than you were last week. Getting better this year than you were last year. Life expects us to make progress. We learned yesterday. Life expects us to make measurable progress in reasonable time. Some people don't make much progress. Some people are still talking after 10 years, making the same verbal errors they made 10 years ago. 10 years. And they're making the same errors in their speech, in their language that they made 10 years ago. See, you got to make more progress than that. Because errors in language can cost you too much. What if you meant to say to someone you care about, you meant to say, what's troubling you? And instead you said, what's wrong with you? See, that's a big mistake. And we'll allow you that mistake 10 years ago, right, when you didn't really know. But 10 years later, to be making the same error in speaking judgment, you've got to get better than that, right? The last 10 years have got to show better results than that. So we must have repetition. But some people repeat and don't make much progress. Like the guy says, I got 10 years of experience. What appears to me is you got 1 year of experience repeated 10 times. So the key is not just repetition, but the key is repetition for the purpose of getting better and getting better. This is my 35th year of lecturing to the public. Now, I lectured and trained and taught in my business organizations. But for the public now, 35 years. So I should have cleaned up some errors, right, in my speaking from 35 years ago, and I promise you that I have. So, repetition. Here's another one that's important. Brevity. You know, the better you get at communication, the more you can say things in fewer words. It doesn't take 10 minutes. In a minute or two, you've said it. In 15 minutes, you've said it. It used to take you a couple of hours. You get to where you can compact. Once you're really good at your own language, you can compact an idea into a shorter period of time. And especially now with everything moving so fast. You know, people haven't got much time to spend much time. This is a bit unusual, spending 2 days. Most people haven't got that kind of time. And so you've got to get it said. You've got to get it told in a fairly short period of time now because life is moving so fast. So brevity is very important. Jesus was brief, putting together his team of disciples. He used to wander around the countryside, and every once in a while he'd say to somebody, you, follow me. See, that's short. Very brief. He didn't harangue them for an hour, give them all the reasons why, just very brief. Now, why could he be so brief? Here's probably why. For all that he was that he didn't have to say. For all that he was that he didn't have to say. Part of that's reputation. You've heard the expression, his reputation preceded him. Got there before he did, so that when he got there, he didn't have to say much. His reputation said most of it. So that when this person got there, it didn't take many words. The reputation was so powerful. The reputation was so extensive that said most of it. So now when you arrive, if your reputation has preceded you, sometimes you don't need then many words. Brevity. You got to be brief with kids because kids haven't got much time. You start talking to kids for 30 seconds and they say, how long's this going to take? I mean, they got things to do and places to go. You know, they can't hang around for an hour, right, and listen to some long discourse. So you got to get it said for a child, especially in a fairly brief period of time. Brevity. Here's another good one: style. It's important to sort of fully develop your own style. Now, be a student of style. The way someone might use hand gestures, the way someone uses the expressions in their face, the way somebody emphasizes a point, style. Well, Zig Ziglar and I sometimes appear together, and they say, Zig, what do you need? And Zig says, I need 50 feet of cord, you know, because he moves up and down the platform, right, as he speaks. Now, I don't do that, so that's Zig's style. My style is to, pretty well stay put, except to do a little work on the board. And that's about it. I don't need much room. Just a little bit of room for me is all I need. But that's just simply a difference in style, right? Tony does the fire walk and the whole thing. That's his style. It isn't my style. But you've got to develop what is your style, what fits your size and your voice and yourself and your temperament, and not try to be something that you're not, right? Or copy somebody or try to be like them. But here's what you must do, though. Borrow from people you admire and the way they speak and take a little piece of this person, a little piece of this person. There's about a dozen of my mentors over years of time that if you knew each of these 12 people, you would say, I see a little bit of them in Jim Rohn. Each one of them, a little bit of each one of them in his style. So I've picked that up. Sometimes you pick it up and you don't even know you're picking it up. But if you'll be a student to admire someone who speaks well, who does well, presents well, you pick up a little from each of them. But now it must turn out to be you. Okay. Make sure it's finally you. Amplified, educated, inspired, influenced, yes, but always finally you. Okay. Here's another key to saying it well, and that's your vocabulary. You've got to just work on that all of your life. Vocabulary is the tools by which we reach someone with our language. Vocabulary does two things. One, helps us to express. Number two, vocabulary helps us to understand, to comprehend. When somebody speaks, guess what we do? We use our inner vocabulary to translate what they're saying, to speak to ourselves. And you can only speak to yourself when someone else speaks by translating with your present vocabulary. If your vocabulary is limited, the way you can express to yourself what someone else says is limited. It's like somebody's got this much to say, but your vocabulary is so restricted that by the time you now take all of this and translate it for yourself, it's only this much when it started out to be this much. And the reason it's so restricted is because it cannot get through any more of an expanded way than your present vocabulary. So our vocabulary translates to us what we hear, what we see. And our vocabulary also helps us to express what we know, how we feel. It's an interesting concept. So the wider vocabulary you have, the better you can understand. You hear some people say, well, I can't see it, I can't see it. I can't see it, it doesn't make sense, I can't see it. And sometimes the reason is because their vocabulary is so limited that they haven't got much tools with which to paint these pictures. So the more you can expand your vocabulary, the better you can be gifted in speaking to someone. Not big words that nobody can understand, but just an extension of your vocabulary helps you to express better and also helps you to interpret to yourself better what you hear, what you see. With a limited vocabulary, it's like looking at the world through this little tiny hole. And somebody says to you, the world is like this. And you say, no, it's like this. And you say, no, don't you understand? The world is like this, it's like this, it's like this. And they say, how can you say that? It's like this. And why do they say it's like this? Because that's all they can see. Now, if you want to see the wider world, plus the opportunities, plus the potential, you just need to expand your own vocabulary. Or maybe you've got a lot of vocabulary that you're not using. That's why these kinds of exercises of listening and comprehending and taking notes and all that is such a good exercise just for the exercise, let alone for the information that you get. Some of my friends took a survey. They were trying to come up with some rehabilitation program among prisoners. And they weren't looking for this, but here's what they found. There's definitely a relationship between vocabulary and behavior. Here's what they discovered. The more limited the vocabulary, the more tendency to poor behavior. Isn't that interesting? And when you stop and think about it for a while, it makes sense. With such a limited vocabulary, you just can't see all that you should see. You can't comprehend all that you should comprehend. Your ability to comprehend the danger as well as the opportunity is so restricted because of a lack of vocabulary. Then with such a lack of vocabulary, if you can't express what's going on in your heart, and you can't express what's going on in your head, you can imagine what a little small world you live in simply because of the restriction of vocabulary. You haven't got the tools to comprehend, and you haven't got the tools to express. Wow. And so after a while, your world becomes so small, you only need a place 8 by 10 to live. Right? Because your world is so small. And then by not understanding, guess how many mistakes you'll make every day if you don't understand? I mean, it's horrendous. And the mistakes compound from day to week to month to year, and finally trouble and devastation finally comes. Simply because the inability to comprehend from lack of a good, useful vocabulary. That's why education is so important. That's why forever learning is so important. So here's the key. Keep learning the rest of your life. Keep expanding your vocabulary all of your life so that your ability to comprehend widens and your ability to translate and speak widens. These are great tools for vocabulary. My grandchildren are homeschooled. And I remember dropping in one day, and my Linda and Michael, every day they would have what they call the word for the day. They'd put it up on a little blackboard, the word for the day, and have the kids repeat the word and the meaning of the word, right? Here's the word and here's the meaning of the word. So that during the day they'd say, what's the word for the day? Here's what it is. What was the meaning? Here's what it is. And by the end of the day, the kids had mastered 1 or 2 more words. Just by a little concentration of this is the word for the day. By the end of the day, it's locked in. By the end of the day, they'll never forget it. Because all day long, you use little illustrations. Here's what that word means, and here's a good illustration. Increasing your vocabulary. Here's an important book to have in your library, the dictionary. It's fascinating. The source of words is fascinating. The word halt, where would that come from? The word halt, that's not French. It's got to be German. A Frenchman wouldn't say halt. Say, no, that wouldn't make sense. It's interesting, the origin of words, where they came from. Some from Spanish, some from Italian, some from Latin, some from German, some from French. This whole composite of the English language has been influenced by all of these other languages. It's fascinating, the study of language. Because language determines your income. Language determines your relationship. Language greatly determines your future, how wide it is and how big it is and how unique it is. your language, then the gift of expression, being able to express how you feel. And whether you write a book or whether you just speak well and translate what's going on in your head and your heart. You know, that ability, all of your life is so unique. You cannot restrict yourself on the disciplines that it takes to achieve those goals. Okay. Now here's another key on saying it well. Don't forget to say it. Become expressive. Women probably here are better than this at this than men. Saying how they feel, saying what's going on in their head. Sometimes a man, you got to dig around to get what's going on in his head. He's not that easy, not that outgoing in sharing his feelings, his heart, his head, what's happening. But you just have to keep working at it. Don't forget to say it. Here's a good expression. Actions are no substitute for words. Now, we've heard the other side to that, right? Words are no substitute for action. Talk, 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 never act. See, that's not good. Here's what else isn't good. Act, 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 never talk. Sometimes the man says, well, what I do ought to speak for me. Say, no, you've got to add the language to your action. It's important. Giving a gift is not enough. The little card with the gift, that's what's important. If you give the lady flowers, that says one thing. Flowers say what? You remembered, you care. But flowers have a limited vocabulary. Flowers don't say it all. You know, sometimes a man thinks, hey, the flowers ought to say it all. Say, no, the flowers don't say it all. You got to put in the little card. Right? Little card that says, nobody in the world affects me like you do. And that will stay long after the flowers are gone. The words, nobody affects me. Nobody in the world affects me like you do. See, that's neat stuff. The flowers are okay, but the card, right? The words, see, that's what's powerful. So don't let your actions be a substitute for the words. Okay. Don't fail to say it. Next. Okay, we've covered have something good to say. Do the research. Have something valuable to translate. Then say it well. We've covered that. Now, here's the third step to good communication, and that's to read your audience, whether it's an audience of a child or an audience of 1,000. You've got to read your audience to see how it's coming across. Now you're expressing. Now you're communicating. How are you doing? Are they getting it? Does it make sense? Should you pour it on? Should you back off a little bit? Should you be a little stronger? Should you be a little easier? Right? When it comes to working with your children, you constantly have to monitor. Is this a little too strong? Should I save this for another time? Is this the right time? Is it coming across? Should I do it? Right? Am I being too easy? Should I be a little stronger? All of that translation is so important when you communicate. Because if you don't pick up these signals, I'm telling you, the communication can be a disaster instead of a benefit. Key. Read your audience. I used to have a challenge on reading my audience, because when I first started lecturing, I was so absorbed in my notes. I'm telling you, the audience could have left, and I probably would have just, kept right on going. It took me a while, right, to look up from my notes to see what was happening. What's going on up here? What's going on back over here, right? Are people taking notes? Are they getting it, right? Should I speed it up a little bit? What should I do? You got to read. You got to read what's happening. The first time I talked to an audience of like 10,000 or more, Zig Ziglar and I and Norman Vincent Peale and Paul Harvey and a couple of other speakers were in Kansas City, 10,000 people. This was my first big audience years and years ago. And Zig said to me, Mr. Rohn, you better see what's going on, because if 10,000 people turn on you, you're in trouble. I thought, whoa. Man, I'm searching the balconies looking for what's happening, what's going on. But it takes a while, and first you learn to try to comprehend what a child is thinking while you're speaking. Are they getting it? Is it coming across, right? Is this a little too harsh? Maybe I should be a little softer. You've got to understand that, whether it's an audience of 1 or an audience of 1,000. How's it going? What's happening? Okay. Now, to pick up the signals, here's 3 ways. 1, you pick up what you see. Sometimes it's fairly obvious, how it's going. If you're talking to a guy and he's got his arms folded and his chin tucked down and he's frowning, this means you got your work cut out for you. This one probably isn't going to be easy. So just obvious, right? Somebody's gestures, somebody's body language, right, tells you, right, that you got to press a little hard, you got to push, you got to be emphatic, right? Go by what you see. If somebody's leaning toward the door, it means you got to hurry, right? Looks like he's not going to be here long, so you got to get it going. So here's what you need to read. Read what you see. Now here's a couple of more. Next, read what you hear. Feedback. Mama said a good speaker's a good listener. You speak well by listening well. And what you hear a person say or the child say is signals, gives you signals about whether or not to proceed, maybe to change the subject, maybe to back away. Because winning people to your point of view is a lot like fishing. Even Jesus said to his disciples, I will teach you how to fish, not for fish. You already know how to fish for fish. But he said, I will teach you how to fish for people. And the expression he used was, I'll teach you to be fishers of men. I'll teach you how to fish for people, how to win people, how to catch people's attention, how to get the point across. I'll teach you how to fish, not for fish, but for people, how to win converts, how to get somebody to listen and be persuaded by your point of view. I'll teach you how to fish. That was an interesting illustration. So what do you do when you fish? The experts will tell you, you don't jerk like this. You've lost them. No, just easy. And if it's a little too tight, ease up a little bit, and then pull a little bit, and then easy. And then, pull, easy, pull. Isn't that it? That's fishing. And you got to do the same thing when you communicate with people, right? Right? Pull, right? Strong, easy, not too strong. You'll blow the deal. Enough, but not too much. Easy, pull, easy. And that's the conversation, the give and take with a child or with a person, a sales situation. Doesn't matter what it is. You just have to learn to fish well. When to put on the pressure, when to be strong, little levity, little laughter, tell a story, right? Not too severe, easy. It's the key, communication. So we read what we see, we read what we hear. Now here's the tricky one, to read what you feel. Here's where the women seem to be already schooled in picking up emotional signals. Women seem to have this, the females seem to have this antenna that picks up all this emotional stuff. A woman says, it doesn't feel right. Man says, what does that mean? It doesn't feel right. It looks right. I said, no, it doesn't feel right. But men can train themselves to pick up these emotional signals so you don't talk past what your emotional signal said. Hey, this is not the time. And if you don't pick up those emotional signals, you can say some damaging things. If you don't pick up the heart stuff, the emotional stuff. So, men have to work at it a little harder than the women. They seem to have it built in. Women have this instinct, the female side. Especially danger. Women are so good on danger. And I guess, way back, Papa's off providing, Mama's home protecting. That was it way back in the wilder days. So she picked up these instincts of the sounds. What is that? Right? A little rustle in the outside the little farmhouse. What is that? What's going on? Because she had to stay home and protect while the man is off providing. So she learned these incredible instincts, especially danger. Women are so good. In the middle of the night, she says, go look. He says, no, everything's fine. She says, I'm telling you, go look. He says, okay. So he gets out of bed, stumbles downstairs. The front door is open. How did she know? They just know. I don't know how they know. In the middle of the night, the baby cries. Mama's awake. Papa sleeps. Mothers sleep near the surface. They do. They sleep near the surface. And the least little thing, I'm telling you, they're awake. It's incredible. So, there's an interesting illustration also. Ancient illustration said there are sheep and there are shepherds and there are wolves. And that's fairly standard. But here's what else it says. Remember, some wolves are so clever, they've learned to dress up like sheep. Now you need a woman. Man says, looks like a sheep, talks like a sheep. Woman says, ain't no sheep. How do they know? They just know. Back when I was building my organizations and other enterprises, I used to have a woman sit in that I trusted and that I knew well on some of the interviews I had. She would just sit there in the interview. And when the interview was finished, I knew what I saw and I knew what I heard, and I would ask her how she felt. She would say, hey, I really felt good. I'm telling you, I listened to that. Or she would say, something, something, something. Women know this something stuff that men find a bit mysterious, but I'm telling you, it's valid stuff. She'd say, something isn't right, something isn't right. And if I sort of ignored that and went on, sure enough, she was right. Something wasn't right. She picked up the signal. Especially with your children, you got to pick up the signals. Because if you don't, you can do more damage than good if you miss the signals. Okay, good communications.
This is the end of this disc. The program continues on the next CD.